Today, I sat down with AJ Butler, a real estate agent in the Fort Lauderdale area, and we talked about all things real estate investing and 1031 exchanges. Let's get into it. Thanks for joining us today, AJ. So the first question I have for you is, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in real estate? What made you choose this career? And how long have you been a realtor?
Yeah, for sure. So I will. I'll try to tell it very concisely because it's a little bit of a long story. But in 2019, I believe I dropped out of college, got into the investing side of real estate, did around 75 deals before I got my license, which is what got me to the Florida market. I'm over in Fort Lauderdale now, like you said, as a licensed agent. But I was on the investing side for about 3 years, and once I moved to Florida, some things happened. The investing firm that I was working for, the real estate investing firm, ended up not going on any further, I guess I'll say. So it kind of met me with a pretty tough decision. And at that time, I knew and loved real estate, so I decided to get my license. Okay. And I've been doing that now for 3 years. So that's how I kind of got into the real estate game. But yeah, started out on the investing side.
Okay. No, that's kind of a nice story to hear about getting in. So obviously, as a qualified intermediary dealing with investors, from that end, you starting out in the investment side, working with investors that way. So how familiar are you with 1030 exchanges, and what role do they play in your business now?
Right. So previously, I did and was very familiar with 1031 exchanges because I was basically at that point on the investing side, the person that connected the seller of the home to the end buyer, right, the investor. So they were doing a lot of that. I didn't know a whole lot about it back then. Now I know a little bit more. On the agent side of things, I'm starting to work with a little bit more of investors, but it's not a huge part of my business. Never done a 1031 exchange or helped a client get a 1031 exchange so far as an agent. But I used to do that all the time on the investing side when I was kind of putting those deals together. So okay. Understand what one is, but haven't quite used it yet. In my licensed career,
So far, okay.
Yeah.
So even from the investment side, then tell us a little bit about your history or knowledge with the 1031 and how that were there certain things that would come up that could cause some issues there? How did the 1031 how they come through with those investor clients of yours?
So yeah, so with the investor clients way back, again before I got my license, they were the kind of guys that bought as many properties as they could, as low as they could, of course.
Right.
And I was the one that sourced the deal. So when the 1031 came into the picture, it was hey, that's when they would reach out to me to find them another property, if that would make sense. So were
they within their 45-day identification period?
Yeah,
during
absolutely.
that time? So did they tell you, hey, we only have 30 days left to find something, and get on it right now?
Yeah, it ended up being, again, I'm not too savvy with, I wasn't too savvy back then with, the 1031 exchange process, but I knew that they gave me a deadline and a timeline. So back then, when I was on the investing side, I was getting 3 to 4 properties under contract a week, okay? And, we mentioned it earlier, but I would wholesale some of these properties as well. And that's what these investors came to me for. So they needed a property really quickly. They knew I had a good product, and we got it done and closed really quick. So as far as the 1031 side of things goes, again, wasn't too savvy with it, but I know that they were utilizing that a lot when they were purchasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so from that end, obviously that kind of delved you, got you into the real estate side of it, and from that end. So now, obviously, as you mentioned, you really don't have that many investors now on the side.
On the license side.
On the license side now from that. But do you still see any opportunity there, being able to reach out to a qualified intermediary such as myself when those type of questions come up in that
Yeah,
area?
absolutely. So, and it's actually, it really, the perspective I've had now from being in real estate on the investing side without a license and now having a license as well, it gives me the opportunity to talk to sellers and buyers in a totally different realm than just an average agent would. But yes, talking to somebody like yourself when that time comes with a buyer client of mine, I do work with investors. Haven't done the 1031 exchange yet, but have helped a ton of investors. So yes, when that conversation comes up, it's really helpful to be able to lean on somebody like yourself that understands the 1031 exchange game at a way higher level than I do.
Yeah.
You know.
So as the realtor, then what do you look for in that qualified intermediary that you know will be perfect for your client investor, your investor there?
I mean, honestly, just competence. But what I'm looking, for in somebody that can explain this to a client is typically these investor clients. They want to move quick. They don't want the entire story. Maybe a whole lot of times they just want to get right to business and understand what they can and can't do. And it's really nice to just be able to pass the baton over. Know enough where I can get them interested in a 1031 exchange if they don't already have knowledge of it. But then be able to pass the baton over to you, and you just tell them very quickly, hey, here's what you can and can't do in regard to this, and this is how we can help you,
Right.
and what it would do for you, which I think it may be helpful a little bit if you would just kind of explain some of the benefits of like a 1031 for a client like that.
Yeah, so when they reach out to us, it's always about learning what they're trying to do, understanding their bigger picture as that real estate investor. Where are they coming from, where they want to go, because that's one of the beauties of the 1031 is they don't necessarily have to sell, for example, sell in Florida and buy in Florida, right? So I know a lot of investors they're moving out of those higher tax states and coming to Florida or Texas, or some that don't have even state income taxes in that regard. And that's one of the beauties. There's no defined, I have to sell here and buy here. You can diversify across geographically, and that's one of the beauties of the 1031 exchange. But also not only diversify geographically, but also by asset class, right? So, I don't know if a lot of the investors, I assume they were real estate or residential real estate investors, or did you have any commercial as well?
The majority were residential. As close as we got to commercial was like fourplexes, not like strip malls or anything like that.
Okay. And that's the beauty, because the asset class side of it is one of the misconceptions. But if I'm selling a single family home rental, do I have to buy a single family home rental? And that's just not the case. You can sell that single family home rental and buy that great condo on Fort Lauderdale Beach or something,
right.
From that end. And that satisfies that like kind requirement. Or going from, they're selling this commercial building and they want to reallocate to a bunch of single family residential investment properties that they can rent out. That's all great within the 1031 exchange. So there's a huge benefit within the 1031 exchange to be able to diversify geographically, but also across asset classes in that regard too.
Right,
so,
right. You actually just reminded me of a story or a scenario that we've talked about before. I believe it was a woman that was, and maybe I was telling you this story. I can't remember how it all went down, but this lady had a luxury house of some sort that she was renting out, and decided that the luxury space just wasn't for her, and she wanted to then basically 1031 exchange that property after she sold it into multiple more like standard homes, not the luxury market, right? So that's something that people can do.
Yeah. So we do see a lot of that. They get to this point where if they've done 1031 exchanges or they have this property that's in this luxury market, that in reality you're only going to possibly rent to a certain type of clientele, right? Or there's only a certain type that could actually rent, that type of property. And so the beauty of the 1031 is we have a lot of clients, they go from this one big property that they've had in this luxury market, and they diversify it back down into 2 or 3 multiple properties, probably I would say in more of a mid-level market where they can have a better return because they have a larger audience or a larger client base that they are willing to rent to.
Might be a bit more stable.
Correct. Yeah. So,
okay.
And the beauty of that too is, going from 1 to 3, you're not beholden on one vacancy, right? So if you're going to 3 properties, if one goes, you still have the other 2 properties still income producing for them until you can fill that vacancy, and you're not just, one vacancy, there's no income coming in. So that's another beautiful aspect of the 1031 exchange in that regard. So, it's a great tool, and we see it all the time, whether it's going from 1 to multiple or multiple to 1. Then in the opposite direction, you have a lot of people, they want to consolidate down because they're tired of the management of 3, 4 properties. They're like, why can't I just manage 1 property? So that's the beauty of the 1031.
Let's stay on that for just a quick second, because I think that's pretty interesting. So let's say an investor has 3 or 4 income producing properties or so. They want to sell that package or that portfolio and just put it into 1 property that they can manage if they're maybe towards the end of their career, or again, like you said, just consolidating. What does that end up looking like with, because some may have longer sell timelines and stuff. How does that end up getting wrapped up into a 1031
So
exchange?
so the beauty is we can look at that and see, okay, let's look at the time frames. Are they selling as a package all four at once, or are they going to be selling, and that's to one buyer, right? Or are they selling each property individually to different buyers? Obviously the market might dictate how that goes.
Right.
And so with that 1031, we can actually structure it to either where we have one or more properties in the same exchange or have it in separate exchanges. And one of the big things along those lines is if it's in one exchange, we're always going to look at the first property that's sold because that's where your time frame is going to start from. But if you put in multiple exchanges, each one independently has their own time frame in that. Now you can identify the same property, replacement property, but each one is on its own separate time frame because of how that could structure out with that, especially if you do find that replacement property. When's that one going to sell? Is that going to sell before maybe two of those four sell?
Yeah.
So then we're looking at structuring it a little bit on a hybrid side with some reverse exchange portion of it too. So it can be really flexible depending on how that's going to play out with the sale of those properties.
That right there is why I think talking to someone like you is important, because all the different timelines, like that's a particular scenario that could be extremely overwhelming for like a singular agent to focus on, for example. They're already in charge of selling all of the properties and helping to find this other one, but worrying about the timelines like that is where something
and
like
that's
yourself
big
can
because
step
that
in,
can make or break an exchange, especially if you
Right.
haven't found something. We always encourage, and I'm sure like you're always doing, is you're looking ahead of time, right? You don't necessarily have to start once you sell, but always looking in advance and obviously negotiating a closing date to be a certain time. So at least now we can start placing the time horizon on certain things. What are certain things going to sell? Because in the end too, if something doesn't sell, you just don't 1031 those properties. They're still in your portfolio. We can do that later or something like that. So we're always looking at how that was, and that's the beauty of us being able to talk to people, seeing the full picture of the story in that regard. Taking some of that burden off of you as a realtor, because that's what we know, right? That's the purpose of us as the qualified intermediary, and then just communicating that to you. Here's how it's playing out. If this is closing here, you kind of now know you either you're rushed to get these other ones sold or not. What happens if we don't get that sold? How does that play out? What happens in that regard too? So
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a great, and again, the 1031 is great for investing, not only for just diversifying, but building that generational wealth. I don't know if you've had, or if your investor clients have, how long those properties have been in with them. Was it passed on to them? Do they want to pass it on to their heirs? Tell us, have you seen any from your investor clients that way?
From the investor clients previously, when I was on the investing side, don't necessarily know their stories a whole lot. It was typically very quick transactions. Didn't get to know them a whole lot. Right. Now on the agent side, yes, the few investor clients that I have, they're not like passed down family to family, because I'm in such the market, Fort Lauderdale, right? A lot of people are coming from out of state, so nobody has really owned there for many, many years. They're typically selling something somewhere else
that they probably owned for many years, or
yes,
that's
whether
been
it was
passed in
family or whatever,
right.
yes, and then pushing that money into the Southeast Florida market, or just South Florida market in general. But yeah, that's the majority of what those people are doing. Yeah.
No, it's great, because again, the 1031 does help build that generational wealth. So now you being invested with your new clients here and what they are looking for, you now get a sense of what's their long-term goal in owning this property. Is it something that they're going to eventually want to sell or keep it in the family and pass it on, or eventually do sell but still find something to keep in the family? And that helps build that generational wealth that the 1031 does allow with that. So no, I appreciate the time of you coming and sitting down today with us, AJ, and learning a little bit more about you. And how you became a realtor and how you help investors along those ways. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
And that wraps up our conversation. If you have any questions about 1031 exchange or need assistance in a 1031 exchange, my contact details are in the description below.